Hello, this is Brother Cromar from the Math Department at BYU, Idaho, and this is a supplement of Lesson 14 dealing with independent samples. And so this will be the outline of the supplement dealing with SPSS commands for Lesson 14. So I'll first go over histograms, followed by the explore command, followed by recoding, and then wrapping up with independent samples. So first let's go to histograms, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the data that you used in the reading, on the online textbook reading. And so this is reading practices. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Graphs, Legacy Dialog, and I'm going to go to Histograms. So what I'll do is that first of all, this data represents, it's comparing two different groups, a developmental group of children and a normal group. Okay, DEV is the developmental group, and GEN is the general group or the control group. And they're looking to see the number of days each week that children read at home with their parents. And so we want to compare the averages between those two groups. So the measured variable is nights per week that they read with their parents, and that goes up here. But the grouping variable always goes in either the rows box or the columns box. If you put it in the rows box and click on OK, you'll see histograms stacked one on top of the other. If you do it to where you put the grouping variable in the columns box, you click on OK, then they're side by side. My own preference is this, but either one, depending on what your teacher tells you, your teacher, it may not matter, but these are the two ways that you can do the histograms. Now the next item here is dealing with the explore command. So let's go to the data again, and so now I'll do analyze descriptive statistics explore. And so the measured variable is nights per week that they read with their parents, and the grouping variable, that now goes into the factor list. Okay. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on plots. And so I'll click on histograms, even though I prefer that the histograms, because the scale, which I'll show you in a minute, is different for each of the different histograms using Explore. But we'll click on it anyway. And then I'll click on normality plots with test to get you your QQ plot. If you click on continue and then click on OK, you will see a whole bunch of output. So here's where you have the descriptive statistics for the two groups. You have the histograms for the two groups. Now in this situation, the horizontal axes, they're the same, but quite often they're not. And so going back to the previous example up here, when you use Legacy Dialog's histogram, the horizontal axis will be the same for both groups. Okay, so that's why I prefer using that one. You also will get, for the Explore command, you get the QQ plots for both groups. And then you can also get the box plots. Now with the QQ plots, a word of caution. I know that there are some students up to this point when they want to get QQ plots, they go analyze descriptive statistics QQ plots. That only works when you have only one group. But now that we have two groups, this will not work anymore. So do not use that. So that's why we wanted this to gravitate you towards using the Explore commands, because in every situation, when you're looking at quantitative analyses with quantitative data, you can get QQ plots with the Explore command. Okay. So then the next item that we want to cover is recoding. Okay. So now let's go back to the data set. And that's not the data set. This is the data set. So if I go to transform, automatic recode, that's how we do it. Now the primary reason why we do that is that with the grouping variable, it could be a string variable like this, but if it's a string variable that's relatively small, we're okay. Now you see here the string variable is only 3 characters long. But if you go to variable view, you see that this width of the string variable is 300. So any width that's large, and if I remember, it's above 8, it's usually above 8, you're okay. But if you're under 8, you're okay. You don't have to do automatic recode. But if you're above 8, then that's when you have to do automatic recode. Okay. So then what you need to do, so you could do one of two things. You could go in here and change the width. But what if you have a character that's super big over here anyways? So the shortcut to this is if you go to transform automatic recode and then redefine or create a new variable. So what I'll do is that I'll put the group variable over here. I'll put in group name, which is group recode, and add new name, and then click on OK. And then if you go back to the data set, you will see that the group variable is recoded. So the developmental group is 1, and if we go further down, the control group or the general group is group 2. Okay. So that is how we do recode. And so the last item that we'll cover in this video is independent samples, and where we'll use that recode variable. And so what I'll do now is I'll do analyze, compare means, independent sample t-test, okay? And then I'll put in that group recode under grouping variable. And how I define my groups, it's based on what's listed here in this column. So we define the groups. Group 1 is now 1, group 2 is 2, okay? So we click on continue, and the test variable is our measured variable, which is nights per week that the children meet with their parents. Then we click on OK, and then we get our output, okay? So this is where, now first of all, you can get your descriptive statistics up here, your means and standard deviations, but the confidence interval in your items for hypothesis test, it's in the equal variance is not assumed. The reason why we use the equal variance is not assumed is because if we use that bottom row, it's always going to be correct. If we don't have equal variances and we assume equal variances, then that's an issue. But basically, here's where you get your test statistic, here's your degrees of freedom, and here's your p-value if this is a two-sided test. If it's a one-sided test, you take that number and divide it in half. And then over here on the bottom right is your 95% confidence interval of the difference. Okay? And that concludes the supplemental video for Lesson 14 dealing with SPSS commands.